recommendations in regard to applied behavior analysis. And autism spectrum disorder is characterized by persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction, as well as repetitive behavior, interest, and activities. John Cooper defines applied behavior analysis, which we will refer to as ABA, as a treatment approach rooted in the principles of behavior which are applied to address socially significant behavior and that uses experimental methods to determine function-based interventions in order to improve these behaviors. But, applied behavior analysis is one of the most widely used and accepted treatments for autism, and therefore an examination of the ethics of ABA is prudent. We will be discussing three main issues surrounding ABA and its use for treatment. First, we will examine the dichotomy between the personal rights to autonomy for individuals with ASD versus their need for treatment. We will then examine the quality of research which supports the use of ABA for individuals with ASD. And lastly, we will discuss the legal issues related to ABA treatments. The members for the debate include Trevor Kopsick, Miranda Fields, Asenet Vallejo, and Kelsey Wright, and myself, Megan Leonard. I will begin the debate by talking about neurodiversity movement and why ABA infringes on the rights of those with ASD. And Kelsey will present the pro side as to why ABA is a necessary treatment for those with ASD, as well as offer a rebuttal to my arguments. I will end this section by rebuting any pro side points not already addressed. For the topic of empiricism and ABA, Asenet will begin by arguing for the validity of the research that supports ABA as a treatment for ASD, and then Trevor will present the con side, as well as rebuting the evidence presented. To conclude this section of the debate, Asenet will have the opportunity to refute any evidence provided by Trevor, which has not yet been addressed. Speaking for the pro side, Miranda will discuss the legal arguments for the use of ABA to treat autism. Trevor will offer a rebuttal and follow with an argument that ABA actually causes situations that require restraints, violating a client's right to a free and appropriate education. Finally, Miranda will be able to respond to any points provided by Trevor, which have not yet been addressed. So I think that most people, to begin, I think that most people would agree that if any medical or psychiatric treatment violates one of the core ethical principles, it cannot then be considered ethical. ABA violates the core ethical principle of being just. This principle, in its essence, is the golden rule, and it seems like a pretty straightforward principle to follow. Except one person is biased towards another, they fundamentally view that person as different and thus treat them differently, and not necessarily the way that person wants to be treated. The foundation of ABA is rooted in a medical model. ABA practitioners are attempting to treat the symptoms of autism. However, this perspective creates prejudice towards autistic people. To illustrate this point, I'd like to show you an informational ad campaign from New York University's Child Study Center. 1 second. So you are looking at, what you are looking at is an ad campaign written to parents from autism and Asperger's syndrome. And sorry, I'm just trying to exit the screen. Oh, okay. So it's hard to discriminate what the goal of that campaign actually was, but what is evident is that the medical community that sought to help treat autism are the ones who are actually stigmatizing, shaming, and stereotyping the ASD community. Clearly, the medical model views autism as negative and something to be rid of, and which creates prejudice against that community. The neurodiversity community offers an alternative perspective. According to Capital, the social model of disability views disability as a social construct. The autistic community views their differences as part of the natural variance among species and requires accommodations. So just as you would provide accommodations for a non-ambulatory person, such as a wheelchair or a ramp, The ASD community seeks to have society accept them as they are, celebrate their strengths, and accommodate for their differences. The real problem of the ASD is living in an intolerant society. In fact, measures taken by therapists to correct repetitive behaviors, such as stemming or fixed interest, can at the very least cause undue stress and potentially even harm the individual. This violates the ethical principle of do no harm. In this next clip, a teenager girl with autism, Carly is a teenager girl with autism. She has learned to communicate through computer typing, and she shares the internal context of her self-injurious behaviors. And sorry. Okay, so this is not set up where I want it to be.
I am cute, funny, and like to have fun.
Through her torrent of words, Carly began to unravel the mysteries behind her often wild behavior. Like banging her head.
Because if I don't, it feels like my body is going to explode. It's just like when you shake a can of Coke. If I could stop it, I would, but it's not like turning a switch off. I know what is right and wrong, but it's like I have a fight with my brain over it.
All right. Sorry, let me get back to. So if the function of one's self-injurious behavior regulates their sensory input, is it ethical to use ABA procedures such as restriction or blocking to correct these behaviors? Additionally, therapists often take measures to mitigate the fixed interests of autistic people instead of encouraging their behavior. Their argument is that by expanding the world of this person, they are contributing to their independence and personal freedom. However, according to Kapp et al., the proponents of neurodiversity movement argue that restricted interests can benefit the autistic person by providing a safe niche community that insulates against bullying and supporting social communication and specialized skill sets. The famous author and autism speaker Temple Grandin said it best in her 2013 address to the Chicago Humanities Festival. Grandin said, "This is the stuff that saved me: horses, model rockets, and electronics. Those were the only places I was not teased. The bullying stuff has really gotten out of hand." The neurodiversity community argues for this strength-based approach while assisting autistic people. Lastly, according to the Professional Ethical Compliance Code for behavior analysts do not knowingly engage in behavior that is harassing or demeaning to persons with whom they interact in their work, Code 1.05. However, there are numerous records of autistic adults recounting their condescending and sometimes abusive treatment by well-intentioned behavior analysts. This violates the core ethical principle of affording dignity. These personal accounts cannot ethically be ignored or discounted by behavior analysts. The goal of ABA is to make socially significant impact. The subjective nature of social significance can only reliably be measured by the client. In his 1978 paper, Social Validity, the Case for Subjective Measurement, or How Applied Behavior Analysis is Finding Its Heart, Montrose Wolf states, whether or not the program is helpful can be evaluated only by the consumer. Behavior analysts may give their opinions, and these opinions may even be supported with empirical, objective behavioral data. But it is the participants and other consumers who make the final decision about whether a program helped solve their problems. If former participants of ABA speak out against the helpfulness of the treatment, can ABA even be considered ethical? And that concludes my portion. Kelsey, I'll pass it off to you.
Okay, thank you, Megan. I'll start off by saying, repeating my argument, which is that I don't believe that ABA is a threat to neurodiversity. The goal of ABA is not to change people or make them feel as though they need to change. There's 7.6 billion people in the world, and each one diverse in a multitude of ways. And 1 in 68 children in the US are diagnosed with ASD, each just as unique. So I don't think that we can even try to diversify people in that light, because there's just way too many of us to really do it that way. The goal of ABA is to teach language, social skills, adaptive skills, functional daily living skills, and these skills are taught to help individuals navigate their environment and be understood in a better way. And there's a common misconception that people with ASD are uninterested in social interactions when this isn't always the case. So I work with a client that is large and aggressive and seeks a lot of social attention. So we've taught through ABA various socially acceptable ways to gain attention, such as keeping your hands down when you approach someone, instead of grabbing them, shaking their hand if you want that physical interaction. And these methods have been very effective in decreasing challenging behavior and allowing him to engage in meaningful social interactions at the store, and some more independence because he's 18. So he really seeks that, and we've been able to teach that through ABA. Also, social skills are more than just rigid play schemes. So I know when I was new to ABA, I saw a lot of, we're playing pet shop, pet the dog, give it a shot, like things like that. But social skills teach across all verbal operants, such as manding and tacting, and those skills can generalize across multiple environments, such as home and school. And we've seen that through play research in social play. Behavior is improved and functional communication is improved. So according to Scagnelli et al., ABA procedures are effective in teaching social skills. The data show increase in children manding to peers and adults and a corresponding decrease in problem behaviors. This is a study done with 4 and 5-year-olds. And so I want to also state that this isn't an argument that the world doesn't need to embrace differences, because I think we all know that we have a long way to go in that area. But it is an argument that having social skills allows individuals to communicate their needs and have a much better quality of life. In fact, adaptive and functional daily living skills are among some of the primary skills taught utilizing ABA procedures, such as brushing your teeth, taking a shower, toileting. And these are taught so people can live healthier, longer, and happier lives. And it's easy to argue that we don't know if an individual is happier knowing how to brush their teeth, but if they had never learned, they would certainly feel discomfort over time from never have learned. Another area is safety and ethical dilemmas. So we teach personal safety questions such as phone number, address, what's your name, who's your guardian. And this is stuff that maybe is taught through like discrete trial training, which, the drilling and the questions all day long. That's the type of thing that I think gives ABA a bad name, but these skills are so important to know. If a person were to get lost or were encountering a stranger or a bully or needed help in some kind of way, these are the types of skills that become really important that they have, anyone has. And when we look at SIB, self-injurious behavior and aggression, ABA teaches a lot of coping strategies for these behaviors. So I worked with a client who's very high functioning, high school age, who also suffers from severe anxiety and extreme self-injury. But we've taught many skills such as slow breathing, counting to 10, asking for help, asking for detailed information to help calm themselves. And these skills have been taught through ABA and have been extremely effective in reducing the occurrences of that behavior. And I know ethically, when we look at SIB and aggression in ABA, we think of restraints and we think of all of these ethical dilemmas. However, PCM is what I'm trained in. It's professional crisis management. And the very first thing that we learn in training is antecedent manipulation, which is supposed to be the number one thing that we think of. So any crisis, restraints, or anything that we have to do in a crisis situation is never in place as a punishment procedure. It's never supposed to be punishment. This isn't something that we do to punish you or show you not to do it again. This is literally something that's only in place to keep the client safe and to keep us safe. And with that, mistakes are probably made and injuries have probably occurred, but they could otherwise be worse. And if you look at people like doctors, so doctors make mistakes, unfortunately, and lives are lost, and it can be really horrible, but we still trust doctors and we know that they can help us, and we should see ABA in the same light, in my opinion. Ethical Code 2.09, which is treatment and intervention efficacy, specifically Section B, states behavior analysts have the responsibility to advocate for the appropriate amount and the level of service provision and oversight required to meet the defined behavior change program goals. So in my opinion, we would be doing a disservice to individuals seeking or needing extra support by not recognizing that they have neurological differences. According to Griffin and Pollack, this is a study done for involving 27 college students surveyed on neurodiversity in higher education. And one student said, in regards to their school not identifying their neurodiversity, I was really angry. I didn't understand why no one had noticed it before. And I'm the only one that's noticing these things when teachers should have been doing it, or when I'd been failed by so many teachers. So I think this is a good example of, if we fail to recognize neurodiversity, then a lot of people are missing out on resources and help that they could be getting otherwise. So I want to just close with my final reasoning for being pro ABA. We take a lot of clients that are turned down in other places. I know we have clients that are 18 and above, and they literally can't go anywhere else besides where they are with us, and we do our best to take great care of them, and we've made huge strides. It's a safe place for our clients, and it's proven to be effective for learning and behavior change. So that's why I like ABA. Everyone should love it.
Okay, so
okay.
Hi, I had it on.
Okay.
All right, so I get the opportunity to respond. I think that Kelsey made several valid points. I think I'd just like to respond to a couple. One, that I think it's problematic to say just because something might happen every once in a while, but it's still in general good, is a pretty poor argument. If a person is trained in restrictive procedures and they misuse those procedures, I think one of the videos in class showed how those procedures were used without antecedents. They were supposed to be used to prevent the child from harming himself or others, and they were used to control the behavior, more as a behavior modification technique, which didn't decrease the behavior at all. And definitely violated that child's legal rights, and it was litigated against for abuse. So I think we have to ask ourselves as a field, if our technology is being misused, how we have some ethical responsibilities, and what are the ethical responsibilities surrounding that. I would also like to bring up the point that I think Kelsey talked about how we need to kind of trust the doctors, and sometimes mistakes are made. And that is definitely very much the case. However, and even though we have the behavior analyst and not behavior analyst certification board, what kind of real follow through or enforcement do they have besides taking away someone's certification? If we are on the principle of being going to adhere to one of the core ethical principles of being faithful, being honest and true, you might think that such an organization and such a field would post the number of violations, whether substantiated or unsubstantiated, on their website. However, no information could be found about how many ethical violations are being documented. And we don't know when procedures such as that do violate individuals' rights to keep them safe or other people safe, How is that data collected? How can we ensure that every time those procedures are being used, they're used ethically? So I think there's a lot of holes in the field that really can cause harm to it, spread our reputation as behavior analysts. All right, so then we would move on to the second portion regarding the research of ABA. Is that you, Asenet?
No, that's actually Trevor. He's gonna
actually, yeah, I could start on this. So I'll start this out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the research behind ABA and why it might not be as valid as it's made out to be. And I'm going to start with. Oh, really? Like at all? Anything?
Yeah, you're good.
Now you can?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get closer to the screen. Okay, so I'm going to start out with talking about a very important study in ABA's history. And this study was conducted by Dr. Ivor Lovis in 1987. Dr. Ivor Lovis is considered to be a pioneer in the ABA field. And in this study, it was called Behavioral Treatment and Normal Educational and Intellectual Functioning in Young Autistic Children. It's considered to be a very groundbreaking study, and a lot of the acceptance of ABA is based on this study. It was so influential because it claimed that 47% of those in the experimental group recovered from autism and were indistinguishable from their peers. The study was also important because it was one of the rare studies in ABA that used a group design instead of a single subject research design. The issue with this is that it did not use random assignment, and this was due to parental objections, staffing issues, and ethical considerations. So although it had this great result, it didn't use the gold standard of research. So ABA's Ethical Code 8.01a prohibits making exaggerated claims about the treatment. So my question is, if the research it was based on was faulty, can these claims be considered exaggerated? Is 47%, almost half of the people in the study, becoming free of autism? So the way to validate this study would be to replicate the results. So as for the replication results of Dr. Lovis's groundbreaking study, of 58 studies on his ABA techniques, only one met the standard of the original study. And it should be noted that the standards of the original study weren't up to the gold standard of random assignment. The first study to actually use random assignment for an ABA-derived treatment protocol was not published until 2010. This study did find some success in what is known as the Early Start Denver model, but it should be noted that this is only one intervention for ABA. It's a play-based ABA therapy, and it only serves children for from 12 to 48 months. So if we consider the importance of Dr. Lovis's 1987 study and its wide influence on ABA, it's still one of the most cited studies available. We have to ask the question, did it meet strict scientific rigor? And evidence replication attempts have shown that this might not be the case. The BACB Ethical Code Section 2.09 dictates that clients have access to the most effective treatment based on scientific research. So as I stated, the building blocks of ABA are questionable. Is this the best treatment available based on the scientific research? So I'll talk a little bit about some broader ABA studies that move away from this one study. In 1999, the New York State Department of Health Guideline for Assessment and Intervention of Young Children with Autism and Pervasive Developmental Disorders reviewed 232 studies, articles on behavioral treatments. Of these 232 studies, only 5 articles, only based on 4 studies, were found to meet efficacy criteria for recommendation. So out of all those studies, only 4 treatments were said to be proven by these studies, or only four studies prove the treatment. Sorry, battery's running low. So, despite the claims from many proponents of ABA that it is the only valid treatment for autism, a number of other treatments have been shown effective in regard to autism. It is unethical for ABA to attempt to maintain a monopoly on treatment of autism, especially considering the questions raised about the quality of its supporting research. So I'll talk a little bit about some other options that are backed by research as well that can be used for autism treatment. The first one is sensory integration. This is based on sensory processing disorder, which is very commonly comorbid with ASD, with a prevalence of up to 88% of children having both of these. Sensory processing disorder, it interferes with attention and arousal impairments, causes self-stimulatory behaviors, aggression, and self-injurious behaviors, which are basically many of the common behaviors targeted by ABA. This treatment, SI, theorizes that neurological processing and sensory integration issues interfere with purposeful behavior and utilizes sensory experiences to facilitate purposeful behavior. It's also, it takes into consideration the client's needs and interests, so it's a client-directed therapy. A 2011 study by Pfeiffer et al., which actually utilized random assignment, found that when compared to the control group, the treatment group made more significant gains in goal achievement. This is based on parent and teacher reports in sensory processing, motor skills, and social functioning, and also had significantly less stereotypy, which is a common issue with ASD. Another therapy that can be useful is cognitive behavioral therapy. Traditionally, ABA and other purely behavioral approaches have not considered cognition in their treatments. CBT does consider cognition, which is an important part of behavior. A literature review by Rotherham, Fuller, and McMullen in 2011 found that CBT treatment for ASD can be effective in addressing social skills deficits and comorbid anxiety in school settings. And comorbid anxiety is very, very prevalent with ASD as well. I'll talk about the National Standards Project. In 2015, the National Autism Center released their report. It was called the National Standards Project's Phase 2. And basically, this project took all the available treatments for ASD and looked at the research and made categories based on how effective they are. They put CBT in the established category, which means that it has enough scientific backing to be recommended as a treatment for ASD. In addition, they also found 14 interventions for ASD that are in the established category, and there's a visual for that, of the 14 interventions. Give me a second to pull that up. Or Miranda, could you pull that up on the screen? Sorry. Okay. I only see it on your screen.
You might have to unmute, Miranda.
Okay.
There it is. So as you can see, there's a lot of other interventions that have been established for ASD. In addition, there's, I think, 18 emerging treatments. And this means that although they haven't been in the established category yet or put into the established category, there is some evidence that they may be effective. And upon further research, they can be placed into the established category. So that would be the next slide. So those are the oops.
Oh, it's not on there, is there?
No, it's on the it's the second slide. It should be.
Is it showing the second slide?
Yeah, those are the emerging treatments. But as you can see, there's many options that have research backing besides ASD. And then in addition to that, Autism Speak, which is an online resource for those affected with ASD or by ASD, did a parent survey on the top 8 treatments in order of parental preference, and that will be on the third slide. So as you can see from this slide, ABA isn't the first, isn't the most preferred. If we can go back to that other last slide.
Is it not showing
So
the
ABA is
last one?
actually the third most preferred treatment by parents. So I'll close the evidence part of this, the con-evidence part of this debate, by saying that while it is true that many of these interventions are used within the context of ABA, it is also true that ABA is not the only scientifically valid intervention for ASD, or even the most preferred treatment by persons with children with ASD. And that is my side of the research part.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of discuss the pros of the argument. So when we refer to the Professional and Ethical Compliance Code, we can easily note that research is not neglected. As a matter of fact, it involves a lot more of the content than the other codes. And this is not to say that we are going to prioritize this specific area, but as we should all, I mean, all of them should be prioritizing the same level. But the research area does kind of bear great weight in the compliance code as a whole. Under Principle 9.02, characteristics of responsible research, it is stated that, and I quote, behavior analysts conduct research confidently and with due concern for the dignity and welfare of the participants. So doing this would mean that the type of research being conducted should be within the level of knowledge and skills of the BCBA. The gravity of this code must be understood and taken seriously. So referring back to the study of Dr. Lovis mentioned in prior discussion, could we say or ponder on the thought that maybe the research design chosen to implement was out of the level of competency? And then could we also say that there could have been more BCBAs who are providing services, whether it be research or intervention implementation, that are doing so out of their level of knowledge and skills as a BCBA? And could we also consider that human error is bound to occur whether we are accepting of it or not? I think that this in turn should not be the only reflection on the influence and power of single subject research design. When contributing to behavior approaches and potential interventions, it is also crucial to understand and realize that the problem in scientific behavior is the analysis of individual behavior. So the keyword here is individual. And as every BCBA should be aware of, behaviors are distinctive to the individual, and as more and more studies are being conducted, the behaviors for each individual make them unique. So this can testify for why single subject research design is necessary for behavior analysis. When research is applied, it is not about the research procedure that is used, but it should be about the behavior in which society shows in the problems being studied. Single subject research design is often used because of an individual's relevance to man and society rather than relevance to theory. With modifications and continuation of single subject research design, we are coming closer to finding more unique approaches individuals with ASD need. According to Ledford et al., single subject research design methodology has extensive history across several disciplines over time. Also, Bayer et al. Has emphasized on single subject research methodology and how it could be utilized in applied research to construct effective interventions and approaches. And so numerous articles and chapters and books have been written in support of this. Statistically speaking, Horner et al. Supports the statement in mentioning that over 45 professional journals have published single subject research design studies. So efficacy of single subject research studies has been proven across some measures and has also supported and advanced many interventions used in ABA today. So we may also consider the treatments such as sensory integration and cognitive therapy. And we can say that those don't have nearly the amount of research support to be used with autism spectrum disorder, as does applied behavior analysis. Limitations and lack of support for potentially effective interventions may affect the perspective of using single subject research design. When an alternative and more supported research design is applied for interventions such as these, could it be that other research designs are being chosen over single subject research designs because of the restraints that have been exposed over the course of single subject research design utilization? So kind of to leave off on the pro, I want to say that just like any other research design, single subject research designs include procedures that exist to control threats to internal validity. These procedures include ensuring reliability of measurement, dependability of procedures, and also using systematic ordering of conditions involved in the study. And also that all these controls should be considered when deciding that single subject research design is going to be used for application.
All right. And I'd like just to respond to some of that. Okay, so I'll just say that that having a lot of research doesn't necessarily mean it's good research, and there is issues with single subject research design. The first one is it's been criticized for lacking external validity, meaning that the research doesn't generalize easily, which is important to generalize to show its validity. The other issue is it has problems with internal validity as well, which can be addressed through replication. But as I was talking about, replication of many ABA studies has been very difficult. And that's what I have.
Thanks, Kevin. So now to argue the third point about the legal issues surrounding ABA. It's Maria.
Okay. So when looking into the legal issues with applied behavior analysis, there were many legal cases that involved schools and them not providing ABA services to their students. So in 2001, the Sanford School Committee versus Mr. and Mrs. L went to court because their child's school was not providing ABA services to the preschool program. When the students became school age, this school system had ABA services that was implemented by a trained individual. But that individual actually ended up quitting the district, so the district did not have a backup plan, and therefore there were no services provided. The parents then pulled their child from the school so they could receive services at home. The court then held the school failed to provide with free and appropriate education. The parents won the case at the hearing officer level, and the school district had to file to the district court. The issue of the least restrictive environment was compounded by the stay put clause from the IDA, as the student's placement at home was at home for the parent program. The court first checked to see if the state complied with the procedures set forth in the Act. Second, is the IEP developed through the Act's procedures reasonably calculated to enable the child to receive the educational benefit? The district court found that the school district did not provide the student with free and appropriate education, and the procedural violations occurred due to the program recommended showed no resemblance to the student's needs, as there was no data to support any new programming. So the court found the program at the school to be created from administrative convenience and thus a substantive violation of the IDA, and therefore the school district lost at the district level as well. So the schools are expected to provide the least restrictive environment and free and appropriate education to their students. ABA is scientific based and benefits many children, so the schools are expected to have ABA services available to their students if that is the appropriate education for them.
Okay, and Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So I'd like to say that there's instances in ABA in the schools, even though it's legally mandated to be there. What's that?
We can't see you, or I can't. Can you guys?
No, you can't.
Still no?
No.
Video working. Says video isn't working due to a problem with the camera. I don't know what that means. Well, I could just
We can hear you, so that's probably fine.
Okay, so I'm just gonna be off camera and talk about this then. So even though that it's legally mandated to be in the schools, there's been issues in the schools with ABA that have caused children to lose their legal right to a free and appropriate education. So let me get into that. So Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act legally guarantees a free, appropriate public education to all students regardless of disability. The United States Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights states that the use of restraints can be traumatizing and create even more behavioral and academic issues, which could lead to more restrictive environments for the child, and therefore deny the child's legal right to a free and appropriate public education. So a couple examples from my work as a behavior technician. I recently worked in a school with an isolation room. The client I worked with had a history of extensive use of this room due to aggressive behavior. What was interesting was that it was found that the child often engaged in aggression to gain access to the isolation room, in my opinion, due to faulty ABA implementation on the previous BT, who was actually removed from the case by the head teacher because she said that he set the kid off all the time. So basically, the child was trying to escape adverse situations caused by his ABA therapy. After the classroom environment was changed and the child was given more autonomy and control over his school day, his requesting to go into the isolation room by being aggressive stopped. I will say that the isolation procedure was handled legally and humanely when staff was present just to observe the staff implementing the procedure. At no time were eyes not on the child. The child was asked every minute if he was ready to leave the room and also asked the moment he was displaying safe behavior, which of course is kind of subjective. The time he was in the room was recorded to the second, and the report was sent to both the parents and school administration each time. Still, the fact cannot be denied that every second the child was in this room was the time he was denied his legal right to free and appropriate education. Ethical Code 4.07 calls for the examination of environmental conditions which could interfere with interventions. The code was addressed, but the issue is that while the environment was being assessed, the child was still subject to isolation. Another time I was working with a child whose main function for aggressive behaviors was access to tangibles, mainly Cheetos. He loved Cheetos. One instance of aggression stemmed from him losing access to this reinforcer. In this instance, restraints were not used, but it took 4 grown adults to block the child in order to keep the rest of the class safe. Now, if this child, who was bigger than all the adults in the room, had continued to escalate, it's very possible restraint procedures might have had to been used. Ethical Compliance Code 4.10 prohibits the use of harmful reinforcers, and although restraints were not used in this case, the behavior caused by the Cheetos was traumatic. Again, this behavior was caused by an ABA procedure. Ethical Code 4.09 calls for practitioners to use the least restrictive procedures. My question is, considering these examples, does ABA therapy create situations that require the use of restrictive procedures and therefore restrict a child's legal right to a free and appropriate education? Although some states have guidelines in place for restraint and isolation, there still is no national standard. Is the ethical code enough to ensure these procedures are only used when absolutely necessary? Does ABA in itself create these situations? That's my argument.
So I just want to respond talking about the restraints and the safety of the client. So there are many ethical codes that help protect the safety of the client. So for example, Code 4.08 discusses how the reinforcers are recommended rather than punishment whenever possible. So we're constantly focusing on the positive and only going to punishment if absolutely needed. So if the punishment procedures are necessary, behavior analysts include reinforcement procedures for that alternate behavior in the behavior change program. Another example is the code 4.9 discusses that the least restrictive procedures and how they are always recommended to be effective. So for example, in my company, if we are absolutely have to use a restraint, we are expected to fill out an accident report and turn it into our office manager and BCBA within 24 hours. So restraints are taken very seriously and are only used if a client is continuously being harmful to themselves or others.
So I'm going to conclude for the con side, and then Miranda will follow up for the pro side. So in conclusion, the con side argues that the application of ABA is unethical. We have discussed how it violates 3 core ethical codes. We have argued that the evidence of ABA research does not meet scientific gold standards, and that the use of ABA procedures might actually contribute to restrictive environments and lack of learning opportunities for clients. As ABA practitioners, it's in the ethical code that we accept responsibility for our treatments. Such responsibility requires us to critically examine our technologies honestly and with skepticism, so that we can ethically move forward to serve our clients the best way possible. Miranda?
Okay, and so in conclusion, for the pro side, we discussed how ABA is not a threat to neurodiversity. We individualize everyone's behavior plans to them. And for the research aspect, ABA is science-based, so there's a lot of research to back it up. And ABA is legally beneficial for clients in school districts. So whenever we are BCBAs and RBTs working in the field, we are expected to meet all of the ethical codes and provide the best environment for our clients. So that would conclude our debate. I hope you guys enjoy it.